What he doesn't know is we're in beautiful South Africa.
To give his garden the ground force treatment.
His wife's in on it.
When he was in prison, he tried to have a garden.
His friends are in on it.
From childhood, he was interested in gardening.
And we've got to come up with a garden fit for one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century.
Ground Force Mandela Special goes to South Africa tonight at 8:15 on BBC One.
Paddling. A time like this.
A bit of drama and a lot of running.
It's just like nothing else that we deal with.
No.
They're not so cuddly as I thought.
What a buzz. The heat today was just incredible.
Join Truder and Steve on safari in a brand new series.
It was complete action, wasn't it? And
It was very hectic.
Vets in the Wild, Tuesday at 8 on BBC One.
Uniting the UK in the search for undiscovered treasures now in BBC One Scotland, a special Millennium edition of the Antiques Roadshow.
For this special Millennium Antiques Roadshow, we've come to the London Borough of Greenwich and a site which goes back to the beginning of the last millennium. This is Eltham Palace. But it's not actually the oldest part of the palace which is the most eye-catching. The entrance hall shows the very bold approach of the Courtauld family in the 1930s when they built a new house adjoining the older parts of Eltham. They employed the very best designers of the day, and the result is a home full of wonderfully fresh and original ideas of the period, and all mod cons. The lavish style of the public and private rooms shows that the Courtaulds wanted only the very best. The family didn't stay long, but now the palace has been returned to its Art Deco splendour by English heritage. We're often asked why we don't take the Antiques Roadshow to various parts of the country, and the answer is there are many towns and villages that simply don't have a hall big enough to take us, large enough to accommodate hundreds of visitors, our cameras, production team, experts, and so on. So for this special edition, we've decided to scale down the whole operation, and we've sent small teams of experts to village halls in 4 historic sites around the country. And the first of our village roadshows is in North Yorkshire. There's been a castle at Middleham guarding the eastern end of Wensleydale for nearly 2,000 years, and in the 15th century it was the heart of the War of the Roses. The area is famous for its sheep farming and racehorse training. Paul Atterbury, Hugo Morley Fletcher and George Archdale are our experts in the Methodist Church Hall in Leyburn. This year Wales gained a large degree of independence from Westminster with its new assembly in Cardiff. But the first Welsh Parliament was created nearly 600 years ago by Owen Glendower in the small town of Machynlleth. The town still runs one of the oldest markets in Britain and is the home of the Centre for Alternative Technology, which researches renewable energy sources. And we find Eric Knowles, Chris Spencer and Mark Allen in Machynlleth's Community Hall. It was on the shores of Strangford Lough to the southeast of Belfast that St Patrick first set foot in Ireland in about 400 AD. He is, of course, credited with bringing Christianity to Ireland and with banishing all the snakes. The village of Grey Abbey on the side of the loch takes its name from a Cistercian monastery founded in the early years of the last millennium. And in the village hall, the people of County Down have come to show their treasures to Lars Tharp and his colleagues Nicholas Mitchell and Paul Viney. St Andrews on Scotland's east coast also has ancient Christian links. After St Andrew was crucified in Greece, a monk brought some of his bones to Scotland and was shipwrecked here on the coast of Fife in 370 AD. The Scottish flag represents the diagonal cross on which St Andrew died, having decreed himself unworthy of dying on the same type of cross as Christ. Scotland's oldest university resides in the town, and St Andrews, of course, enjoys world renown as the home of golf. Tim Wonnacott, John Sandon and Clive Stewart Lockhart are in the town hall, looking forward to discovering more local history. We've established satellite links with our roadshows around the country, and we'll be able to join them during the day. And also experts here in Eltham will be able to have conversations with people in Yorkshire or Wales or Northern Ireland or Scotland to make absolutely sure that our visitors get the maximum information about their antiques. We've also invited people to email us photographs of their treasures, and Penny Britton is on hand here to answer their questions via the internet. So obviously we're going to have a very busy day. Let's see now what our experts have discovered here in Eltham.
Edward William Tewson, myology, illustrated by plates, and this is terribly flower power, sort of very 60s, don't you think?
Yes,
it looks absolutely wonderful. And it is a masterpiece of the printer bookmaker's art. It is just quite the most incredible thing, because you have all plates here, and all the plates are lithographs, hand-coloured, but they're all what they would call interactive, I suppose, today.
Yes,
They all are absolutely wonderful. Quite an incredible condition. Now tell me about it. Where did you get it from?
This is my husband, who got it from his mother, who was in general practice, and she inherited from the doctor whose practice she bought, and he, it is believed, got it from the doctor that he inherited the practice from, and it's that doctor whose name is in the front, so we know it as far as 1888.
Absolutely wonderful. Actually, the chances of it surviving are also
well, it's been very
incredibly
firmly up
rare.
in the attic, of course.
Very firmly up in the attic. I don't like books in attics, you know. I think they ought to come downstairs.
Yes.
The binding, as you would expect, has fallen to pieces because that's in the original boards with the paper label, and it would have had a paper spine on it as well. Now, have you any idea of the value of this?
No, it's more the rarity of it I was interested in.
The rarity, I think one in good condition would be very rare indeed. It suffers from all the problems. It has movable parts. They would come apart, they would drop off or something like that. So it'd be difficult to find it in fine condition. A fine copy would probably not make more, surprisingly, than about £400 or £500. Your copy, I think, as it is, would probably make about £200 or £300.
Right.
But it's a wonderful thing and so nice to see it.
This was given to my grandfather in the 20s or 30s in settlement of a debt. I don't know how much the debt was. He was told it was a mosaic and that it was a good piece. After the war, one of those dealers that come round to the door came round, and so my grandfather showed it to him, and he said no, it wasn't a mosaic, and the frame was worth more than the picture, and perhaps he would give him £50 for it. And that is literally all I can tell you about it.
Well, that's pretty good. The dealer was wrong. It is a mosaic. It's an Italian micro mosaic, and they were made by basically inlaying these tiny little chunks of stone, each of a different colour, into a plaster base. Now, if you get very, very close to it with an eyeglass, you can actually see, believe it or not, this is a large micro mosaic in the sense the pieces of stone are very big. And they can go down on the small panels to a tenth the size of this. So what they did is they inlaid it with the stone, filled in with a sort of plaster, and then carefully stained so that the white plaster was actually matched in. But you need a powerful glass to see it. It's set into a black marble circle with a ring of malachite around it.
Yes.
And it's actually a piece, what they call a grand tour item. And would have been brought back from Italy anywhere between 1820 and 1850, 1860. It could be as late as that.
Yes, I see.
£50 he offered, yes.
Yes.
I think you'd probably have to reckon now that you'd certainly insure it for £3,500.
Really? Which is that?
Yeah.
Right.
It's Mervyn Peak.
Right. Now, how do you know that?
Because it was Eric Drake. It was part of the South Colony artists in 1933, of which Mervyn Peak was one. And my father was part of that group. And we lived in the gallery where he showed this picture. And, well, that's it.
So in effect, it came directly from Mervyn Peak?
Yes.
By your father?
Yes.
Right, Mark, does that make sense to you?
Makes every bit of sense. I mean, I think that is fascinating, and that should be written down because, you know, that information is almost, I mean, it's so valuable, that bit of information.
Now, can you tell us a bit about Mervyn Peak?
Most people know him probably from his writings and from his illustrations. And people are perhaps now looking at these tremendous works. Madam, where do you hang this lovely picture?
Oh, in the hall. There's plenty of space for it.
Right. The subject, do you know what the subject is? Has it got a title? Is it just fisherman or...?
No, but it's obviously a sark. I mean, it's familiar to me. I can't remember meeting him, but obviously I did. It was about 4 or 5 or something at the time. But I know that's a sark scene very well.
Right. Gosh, Paul, I mean, what a find.
Caves and the sea.
It's a fantastic picture, isn't it?
Fantastic. I mean, it's very, very strong, and that's typical of the 1930s. Very sort of violent almost.
I mean, what you can't see probably is that the thickness of the paint, the impasto, is laid on with a trowel. It has all that very heavy sort of German look about it.
Oh, how wonderful, how wonderful. And the perspective is rather unusual, but I like that. I think it works beautifully.
Well, it's very dramatic with this great black rock and then this extraordinary sea fading into the sky. It's a very powerful piece.
It's interesting because prices for this artist have risen quite considerably, and they used to be just a few £100s for the illustrations, but very few oils have appeared on the market. And there was one last year that appeared called The Glass Cellar, which made £15,000, but it only had an estimate of £1,500. So it's quite interesting to see the excitement and the sort of rejuvenated interest in such an artist as Mervyn Peake. I would say, at the top of my head, 6,000 to 8,000.
6,000 to 8,000? No more than that?
I will go for 10. Let's go for 10.
I'll tell my son. I actually don't like it, but he loves it, so I'll tell him. Discuss it with him.
The family history is that these wall vases were owned by a John Kendall, who became an admiral in the Navy, and they were in his ship as he sailed around the world, and he was on fishery duties south of Newfoundland in the 18th century, and they've certainly travelled the world, I think, these vases.
It's very interesting. Now we have a sailor.
Yes.
And sailors leave from ports, don't they?
Yes.
And these are made of Delft.
Yeah.
But English Delft, or the English Delft were. And almost certainly they were made at the port of Liverpool.
Right.
And it's interesting, I would expect them to have been made around 1765, which is indeed when he went off sailing around the world. And this combination of yellow, this pale green, manganese, this is a typical Liverpool palette. I have suffered a little bit.
Yes.
That one slightly more. Thank goodness it's not along the front, though this one has suffered a bit on the front.
Yes.
But they are immensely rare.
Oh, right.
And fantastically rare. There's only one thing that does worry me, and I recommend that you don't pursue the idea of hanging them up with these bits of string, because you could, that string could very easily perish, and one day you'll have your nice wall pockets on the floor, which would be very sad. Great loss, not merely to you, but to the whole world, because they are lovely.
Yes.
Because as a pair, they are worth £2,500 or £3,000.
Good heavens. Yes. Amazing.
This is a really lovely thing.
Is it?
You know, it's called a cutlery urn.
I knew it was for that, yes.
And we should find, with any luck, that the top lifts up. Ah, here we go. And you'd have inserted your lovely Georgian silver in these apertures around the ring. It's a wonderful object. I'm going to just talk to John Bly about this. Now, John, what do you think about this one?
There's a couple of things I'd like to have a closer look at, Tim, and I'll tell you why. As you rightly say, they should be sort of 1780, 1775, 1780, that beginning of the real pure classic period. But they also made them again 120 years later. And I just want to ask you one or two things and see if we can just determine which is which. Can we look at the little escutcheon on the front there? Do you think that monogram is contemporary? Is the original one or the first one? Are there any signs of it being erased and put in later?
No, I don't think so. And strangely enough, it looks quite sort of Gothic looking, rather Victorian Gothic looking script.
It does indeed. That is not an 18th century monogram. But is that a sort of feather or chevron type inlay instead of, or is it a plain one that's dotted?
No, you've got chevrons and feathers there. It's not a solid boxwood line. It's rather beautifully done, actually.
Wonderful quality. The vase is too slender in proportion to its height to be an 18th century one as first glance. But those other items that we've looked at, those other aspects, I think, make it almost certainly, 1890 to 1910.
Right, does that surprise you that it comes from 1880 to 1910?
Oh, yes, I never really thought anything about the age of it.
If that's the case, John, what would the late 19th century value be of a good quality urn like this?
One as fine as that today, I would have thought in the region of 12 to 1,500 pounds for a beautiful and decorative object.
Well, I inherited her from my father, and he used to look after her for a colleague at work, and he didn't have anywhere to put her in his house, and so my dad babysat her, as it were, for many years, and then he eventually left the work and asked my dad whether he would consider buying it from him. So my dad paid £10 and Aphrodite came home.
Aphrodite, where's that name come from?
That's always the name that my father gave her.
Is it really an odd mix of style? I think you normally this sort of classical figure leaning over rather solemnly would be perhaps termed grief, and it's very much sort of a funereal monument in a way, but taken from that sort of classical idea and brought up to date in a pretty Victorian flowers and colours, in a really an odd mix of styles. Originally this would have been a piece by the Meissen factory in Germany, and it's been copied in France. Looking at these flowers, I think they're probably made by a factory in Paris or Limoges, and in date I suppose it's going to be about 1870. Something like that.
Right.
That would sort of fit with the movement once it's inside a fairly straightforward Paris French movement, which has been put inside the case. And the whole thing looking splendid, but what a size.
Yes.
It really is a big one.
Yes.
Even damaged, you've got to be quite expensive, Aphrodite. Right. I suppose from £10 then, nowadays £1,500, £2,000.
Really? Wow. Yes, I noticed she's working now. She wasn't working when we came in.
Right, that's the secret trick of the roadshow.
It must be.
So what do we have here? An old golf club, paid £65 for at a local antiques fair. What about this, Hilary?
Right, let's have a look at... it says that it's got the name T. Morris on the top face. Well, that's interesting. Can we just have a look? Did he send a photograph? Right, well, what we're looking at is a very nice early club, stamped T. Morris. Now, old Tom Morris was known as the father of golf. He had a shop in St Andrews which opened in the 1850s. He was a great manufacturer of really high quality clubs, but he was in business, or his name was put to clubs, for quite a long time.
So there's the signature.
There's the signature. That's the side view. It's what's known as a scared head club, which means that it's got a long piece that goes up the back there, which is then spliced onto the hickory
onto the shaft,
which is then whipped around with cord.
It looks in pretty good condition.
Yeah, it looks great. Difficult to be able to tell the actual date without seeing it. I mean, if it's an early one, if it's 1860s or 70s, we could be talking about £2,000 to £3,000.
Obviously you're going to have to be a bit cautious because you haven't got it in front of you.
Exactly.
But it's a nice thing, and it seems to be what it says it is, which is good, isn't it?
It is good.
Well, I don't think you could fail to love such a beautiful watercolour as this. I mean, it has everything that one would want in such a great Victorian piece. And the other thing which I love about this picture, which is by John Henry Merle, is the fact that it's in such wonderful condition. Tell me, have you had it in your family for a long time?
Well, I inherited it from my mother about 15 years ago, and it's always hung up in the family home above the fireplace.
Do you know anything about John Henry Merle?
I don't, no.
Right. Well, he's like many Victorian artists, not that well known, but he does paint some wonderful, wonderful watercolours, and they appear occasionally on the market from time to time. But I think this is beautiful. I mean, just look at these two girls here with their dog. It's just enchanting. It's got everything that you want, very sort of quiet, still, but beautifully, absolutely beautifully painted, and nicely signed in that corner there by J.H. Merle.
The art I always thought was unrealistic was in fact the blue mountainous scenes of the Trossachs, but then afterwards we went on a holiday up there, and lo and behold, it is as blue as it looks.
Did you ever
really surprised me?
Did you ever sit here?
I never found it, unfortunately. No, we looked for it, but couldn't find the exact site at all.
Exactly. Perhaps a little bit of artistic license. Have you ever had it valued?
When my mum died about 15 years ago, on the valuation we had there for death duties, they valued it at £2,000.
£2,000, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, not only would I double that, I'd probably treble that, and I think even add a little bit more. So I think £6,000 or £7,000 for insurance would be the right figure. And I think, you know, it's something which cannot fail to go up in value because it's such good quality and such a beautiful work of art. And I can't thank you enough for showing it.
Not at all. A great pleasure to bring it in.
It was only when we saw a program, one of your programs, with R. Leak, something on it, we thought, well, it might be valuable, but we didn't know if it was genuine or not, isn't it?
Well, you'll be relieved to know it is the real thing.
It is the real thing.
And it's called Saint Francois.
Oh, yes.
Okay. But have you ever wondered how on earth he managed to get the colour in there?
It does puzzle you, yes.
It's all to do with what you put in the glass mixture before it actually goes into the mould. And what you've got to do, you've got to add certain fluorides and a hint of cobalt oxide, which gives it the bluey tinge. The longer the glass takes to cool, the more opaque blue it will go. So it goes without saying that the walls of the glass are very thin, but the actual pronounced areas are that bit thicker, so it's going to take longer to cool. I'm just looking underneath at the mark. It's acid stencil, R. Lalique, France, born in 1860, and he died in 1945. Okay, but most of the things in his lifetime have got the R. If you've got a very, very tiny mark in script that says Lalique on the edge with a little R in a circle, that is simply R for registered. So that's a post-war mark, 1950s, 60s and 70s.
What year roughly would this be then?
The date on this would be around about 1930, 1932. But I'm afraid it's a bit distressing looking at the base because you've got a few chips on there.
Yes, well, it was on a window shelf, and we're having new windows put in. We forgot it was there, and with the vibration putting the windows in, it fell off.
Well, it does affect the price, I'm afraid. In its present condition, it's probably worth around about £500 to £700 because of the chips. But had it been in mint condition, it would have been over £1,000. But anyway, just promise me one thing.
What's that?
Don't put any more flowers in it. All right.
I don't think we will.
It was given to me by an aunt before she died, and she used to live in Dublin, so I know it's Irish silver, and that's really all I know.
Right. I'm never sure whether these are called dish rings or potato rings.
Yeah.
A potato ring and a dish ring are essentially the same thing. It's only because Ireland was famous for potatoes that there are two schools of thought as to how they were used. One was that a bowl sat in either end, a porcelain bowl. The other was that a tablecloth or napkin, rather, laid over the top and potatoes were put in them. But the illustrations I've seen in old books have all been with a china bowl sitting in the top. And in fact, dish rings started in Europe quite a long time before they started in Ireland. The first thing I notice is that the piece is very much in the neoclassical style of the 1780s. And that was probably one of the peak periods when dish rings were made. Have you had a chance to look at the marks on this piece yet?
Yes, I have. I mean, you can probably see the marks.
Yes, I can. This is not an 18th century piece. This is a reproduction, and that is a Dublin hallmark for 1902.
Obviously, Alistair, that would have a great effect on its value.
Yes. I would think then its value to be somewhere in the region of £600 to £800. Did it ever have a blue glass liner with it so that it could be used as some sort of serving bowl?
Yes, it did. That got cracked quite a few years ago. And I also wanted to tell you it's actually one of a pair. I don't know whether that makes any difference.
Yes, it actually makes a lot of difference. I would then put the price at probably somewhere around £2,000 for the two.
These chaps are not writing letters, are they?
No, well, when I was a child, I used to thought someone was murdering someone else, but I suspect it's an orgy of some kind.
I think orgy is probably the right word.
Yeah.
This chap looks like Don Giovanni. He's sort of pointing his finger at the, "Oi, you get off my girl." Because there's a lot of fun going on here.
I think we should leave this one alone. I'm afraid it's been polished out of existence as far as value is concerned. And it was made sometime around 1860, 1880 by an English company. I'm going over to this. Now, which part of the world do you think this comes from?
I think it might come from Staffordshire, but I don't really know.
Staffordshire. Shall I give you a clue?
Yes.
Don't worry.
It's cold, yes.
It's very cold, isn't it?
Yes.
It's very cold indeed. It's not Staffordshire. Hard-paced continental porcelain is cold.
Yes.
Staffordshire earthenware, or Staffordshire porcelain for that matter, would be much, much warmer.
Yeah.
So you have told me straight away that this is continental hard-paced porcelain. The whole shape is a traditional Staffordshire shape. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is based on a well-known model made by the Wood family probably around the 1760s, 1770s. But here we have a continental copy, and the chances are is by a man called Sampson.
Yes.
Well-known forger of all sorts of things, including 18th century Staffordshire Toby jugs. The other thing is, I've never seen a Staffordshire example with a red code.
Yeah.
And it's made of porcelain. The Staffordshire ones are almost always made of earthenware. So there are lots of good reasons, but the cold test is a very good one. And I think in that state it's probably worth somewhere in the region of 70 to 100 pounds.
Yes. Well, I wasn't going to sell it anyway.
You've got this fabulous green patina, and in the centre, which is difficult to read, is a table for the equation, which tells you how to set your watch slower or faster than the sundial shows the time, basically according to the season of the year. Now, it's signed by a man called John Rowley, Fateshit, and the easy bit to read is the date, 1703. Can I ask you where you got it?
My father-in-law was a dustman, and it was chucked out in some rubbish one day, and he brought it home.
You're joking. Well, he had good taste, and I think I'm going to change my job because I think it's worth £2,000.
Oh my goodness. Oh, really?
Yes, I do. It's a beautiful sundial.
So I've got a picture here for you, Mark, by Henry Scott Tube.
Oh, yes.
I thought better known for nude boys, but here was sailing boats. Is this where he started?
Well, I think he loved the sea and marine life. I mean, I know he's sort of got a name for painting nude boys, but really, I suppose this is what his
this is his commercial
forte,
bit.
his commercial bit
It's a lovely picture, isn't it?
Look at it, it's absolutely fantastic.
So this has got a label saying Royal Academy 1916, but that can't be right because it's watercolour.
That seems a bit odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I wonder what that means. No, I think that can't be right.
No.
I mean, he exhibited at the Royal Academy, and probably in 1916, but I very much doubt this object that we're looking at.
Right. Now, I think that we should just try and put a price on this if we can. What do you think?
Well, I think subject to sort of seeing it and the condition, I would say
It's
something
very
like
important
this.
for that, isn't it?
It's good, and it seems to be quite a good size. I would say, what, 3,000 to 5,000?
Well, I leave that entirely up to you.
I would say
but
3,000 to 5,000.
Subject to inspection.
Yes, definitely.
I think it is painted under crystal.
It is, exactly. It's rock crystal, so it's a piece of lapidary work. It's a remarkably hard stone, and what they've done is they've carved it from behind in 3 dimensions and then painted it. So it's a miracle of craftsmanship, actually. We call it a reverse intaglio, a reverse cutting in, if you like. And it was a speciality of several London retailers in the late 19th century. It's made between 1860 and 1880. But what's the history in the family? Tell me about that.
It belonged to my husband's aunt.
Yes.
It was a very beautiful woman who had an admirer.
Admirer.
And she also had a collie dog.
Oh, no.
And when the dog died, as a memento,
Yes.
he had the portrait which we thought was painted.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful friendship, a platonic.
Oh, well, those are some of the most excruciating, aren't they? I know.
And this is one of the beautiful
Beautiful
gifts.
presents.
Yes.
Gosh, well, what a touching history. is something you ever wear or not?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I bet
yes,
it's very,
I do.
very pretty.
I do.
I think just want to look at the craftsmanship just for a second, turn it on its side, and look at this fantastic gallery here.
Yes.
The thing about the 19th century is that almost everything in the 19th century, the clothing, the buildings, the jewellery, was beautifully made, and so it's never a surprise to see the meticulous craftsmanship, these little sawn galleries. The diamonds are fronted with platinum and set with pearls, and so you have something for a very specific context. Of course, the English are crazy about dogs, and so the value is actually based a little bit on that, I think. They're very widely collected, and so I think one could safely put this down for about £1,200 today.
Oh.
But there's no price to be put on a gift like that, but thrilled to see it.
It was a wonderful friendship.
Wonderful friendship.
Yes.
Well, very touching. Thanks for showing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a gift to my mum from a family friend who worked in a large house. She was and her husband was the gardener, and my sister and I played with it for many hours.
Really?
Played with him, although always warned not to damage him. But,
Right, so you've got fond memories of it?
Oh yes.
Hilary, just tell me, is there anything I should be telling you about this?
Yes, I mean, what I'd like to know is if it's got something written across its chest. It should have some details on there.
Right. Across his chest it says, made in Switzerland, patents applied for. I don't know whether I can spread his arms a bit and maybe be able to pick that up.
Oh,
He's
yes,
now waving at you.
I can see. It's just sort of on his lower abdomen.
That's right, just down here.
Brilliant. Yep, that's...
Anything else you need to know?
Yes, I'd like to just have a look at his face if the camera could go up. That would be wonderful.
His face, can you pick that up? Sort of reddish moustache and a goatee beard, reddish eyebrows.
Could that hat possibly be a cowboy hat?
Did you play Cowboys and Indians with him?
No.
I suppose it could be a cowboy hat, yes.
So, you can trace it back to how far?
Only 1960s, but when it was gifted to us, I don't know other than it was a toy of the estate, the people that stayed in this large house of an estate.
Yes, it's going to be quite a bit earlier. It'll be dating from the 1930s, probably. He's almost certainly made by a company called Saba. And what I like about those toys is that they're almost like a 20th century version of an early lay figure. You know, they can be posed into any position at all, which is really very clever. And there are ball joints at the crucial points, aren't there? There we go.
Oh God, just pulled his leg
Clive,
off.
what have you done?
Sorry. Thank you.
Safe in your hands.
He looks like Bill and Ben, doesn't he?
He does, in fact. Now, these figures, these Saba figures, were always clothed. And he would have had some sort of suitable outfit. I mean, the reason that I wondered whether he looked like a cowboy was whether he could be a sort of Wild Bill Hickok figure, you know, Buffalo Bill or whatever. But I suppose just as easily he could have been dressed as a farmer or a businessman. They have their own particular market, these Saba figures, and I would say in reasonable condition. Yours obviously has been played with. We're talking about perhaps £100 to £150. So certainly worth looking after.
And have I done anything terrible by pulling his leg off at that point?
Well, as you've just found very fortunately, they sort of pop in and pop out, don't they? It popped back very, very easily, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Oh, yes, thank goodness it did.
It belonged to my mother, who was very fond of fine china, and as far as I know, it was going to be thrown out along with a lot of other things which were regarded by somebody who was doing an inventory as not being very valuable. So she rescued it.
Well, I mean, I'm glad she saw the merits in it and saved it from being thrown out in that way. Because, I mean, let's look at the quality of the work. In the centre, I suppose that's what draws the attention, is the portrait of Napoleon.
Yes.
And that's painted beautifully in monochrome. In the detail of that plate, it looks like a photograph, doesn't it?
Yes, I thought it must be some sort of photograph.
But that's freehand painting. A top miniaturist must have painted that.
Oh, gosh.
You've got the imperial crown, the emblems of Napoleon put into the border.
Yes.
And the oak leaf design is all in tooled burnished gold. In oak leaves, of course, another great emblem of Napoleon.
Yes.
What is done is the gold is laid on as a thick layer of pure gold, and then it's polished in a most technical burnishing, rubbing individual stones and fine tools this way and that to individually draw the pattern on the gold, which looks magnificent when it's new and fresh, but the problem is it wears off. And here, there's a little bit of scratching on the surface gold, but hardly any at all. It really looks as good as new. It's untouched since it was made at the time of Napoleon. I suppose we're going back to 1812, 1813. What a pity, there's absolutely nothing on the back.
Nothing on the back.
A kiln blemish only. There's no maker's mark there to give any clue as to who produced it.
Yes.
But I can't believe anyone except the Imperial Factory of Sèvres could have made this. Would he benefit from a bit of further research into why it was made? But it's going to be expensive. You've got to be £1,500, £2,000.
Goodness me. I didn't really, expect. I thought it might have some value, but I didn't think it would be as expensive as that.
Well, I was left it by my father, who made it for a bet. He used to reckon that if it was metal, he could make it.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of his had come by an original one of these that he'd borrowed for a short while.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, would you like to live up to your bet and make one of these? And we made it for him.
I have to say, I was staggered when I opened the box, because what we have here, to all intents and purposes, is a Colt's first revolver, made between 1836 and 1842. Your father was an incredible craftsman. I mean, if we look at some of the things in here, all the accessories you would expect to have with this particular piece. There's the spare barrel here. I say spare barrel, it's a double-length barrel, which I think really is more probably a target barrel. This is a very ingenious device, which was obviously designed so that you could prime all 5 chambers simultaneously. And obviously at the other end, you could put all 5 balls in simultaneously as well. Other accessories in there include the ball mould here, which again takes apart, and obviously you'd use that to cast your shot in, and even down to the percussion cap holder here, which is mounted with a silver dollar and with a spring clip on the side for dispensing the percussion cap. Even though it's not the real thing, I'm very honoured to actually be party to something that is such a splendid piece. I don't think I can talk values to you. I think that's almost immaterial to a certain extent. It's really made my day, and I thank you very much for bringing it along. Thank you. Thank you.
It's very convincing, isn't it?
Yeah, very, very convincing.
So would that sort of copy fool an expert?
No. When you get something that is as rare as a Colt Patterson, you can bet that it will be looked at very carefully.
Now, this is a straightforward copy, and that's fair enough. But do fakes in the antique arms business cause a lot of problems?
They cause a significant problem, particularly in the field of revolvers like this, because there are modern Italian and Spanish-made copies which are sold very cheaply for people to use for target shooting, which if they're carefully aged and generally fiddled around with, then they will probably fool the unsophisticated collector.
Now, what about values? If that was an original Colt, what would the value be?
Thousands of pounds. You could almost name your price in the States for a pistol like that, because it's an American icon. It was the first Colt revolver, very highly thought of by the Texas Rangers. But
£100,000?
Yes, I could easily see that.
Really? And as a copy?
A copy between £1,000 and £2,000.
So this is a message from somebody from Ontario.
Fantastic.
And it is this wonderful opal pendant. What can you tell me about, Geoffrey? Can you
Well, I think you can say immediately that it's made in about 1900, and that the settings are platinum, and that they're built up from thousands of grains. They're called meal grain settings.
So that's all the little stones going around the outside.
I mean, I think trying to photograph opals is impossible. It's like trying to photograph the sheen of oil on water. It really isn't possible. And I think we're going to have to go back and say, time for professional advice on the opal alone. Not the context of the jewel, not the way it's made, but for gemological reasons, it's got to be shown to a professional jeweller in the right condition.
It's a gift from the Empress of the French to Lord Breadalbane after the visit of the Queen, that's the Queen of England, presumably, to Paris, 1855.
Correct, yes.
So it's 145 years old. And it's a set inside this box.
It is.
My word alive. Good Lord, isn't that absolutely splendid? This is the tray for serving the service on. You've got the sugar, you've got the pot, you've got the milk,
yes,
and 4 cups and saucers. So they would all be served onto this tray. Aren't they fantastic? Oh, Lord, I want to pick that up. Wonderful landscape painting, beautiful gilding, and the mark, of course, of Sèvres. Sèvres 1853. But I suppose made then and then presented as this diplomatic gift.
Yes.
Heavens alive. What a super thing. All with landscapes and fantastical gilding. I mean, the quality of the thing is just mind-bending, isn't it?
It really
How did you
is.
come by it?
I bought it at an auction 5 years ago.
Did you really?
Yeah.
An auction in England?
Yes, in England, yes.
Heavens alive. Can one ask what you paid for it?
Yes, I paid £3,000 for it.
£3,000? Yeah. 5 years?
5 years ago.
5 years ago. It's quite a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, yes.
Did you pay that because you liked it, or?
I thought it was very beautiful. I bought it as a gift for my wife.
How lovely.
Yeah, that's why I bought
do you use it, or? No. Very
Terrified to touch it, yeah.
But it's a pity, really, because this diplomatic gift just shut up in a box and never used. I mean, I'd want to use something like that. Take it to heaven with me and use it up there. I mean, it's beautiful. The price now. I would reckon you've got to think in terms of about £10,000 for it. Your 3,000 has, I'm sure, grown.
Couldn't come to Ireland without seeing a piece of Irish porcelain.
Indeed you couldn't.
Do you use it?
No.
You don't?
No.
Why not?
I'm scared of anything happening to it.
Well, what could
water in that, it might crack.
Well, Belique porcelain, and that's what this is famous for being very, very thin, paper thin, eggshell thin. But this is nice and robust. I'd use this.
Would you?
Of course I would. It's this is the first bit of Belique I've seen for a long time that doesn't look as though it would disappear if you sneezed
well,
at
that's
it.
true. It is a bit more sturdy looking.
That is the dog and harp mark of the Belique factory, County Fermanagh. This is the mark they introduced in 1891 or thereabouts, so it's so-called second period Belique, not the very first. Now, Wedgwood produced something like this in around 1770. But even Wedgwood's design was older than that. It goes back to, and this is where the bamboo comes in, it goes back to China. The early red stonewares from Yixing, tea wares, made of this wonderful lustrous maroon-coloured clay. Some of them are formed in exactly the shape, clusters of bamboo. I love the detail. Have you noticed the little lines in the top there?
Yes.
I mean, this really does look like bamboo that someone has cut like that, and it's a nice sturdy design.
How old is it?
Well, I think that's sometime between 1891 and 1914. That's where I.
Right?
Would that fit in with family history?
Yes. Well, it's an old friend who actually gave me that teapot.
They gave it to you, so it
Yes.
hasn't cost you anything.
Nothing.
Question is, what's it worth? You don't want to know, do you? Well, I haven't seen this particular specimen in Belique ever sold at auction before, but it's a second period. I imagine that if you put it up for sale, it will fetch between £500 and £800.
Would it really?
Something of that order. Yeah, it's a jolly good object.
Well, thank you very much.
We've got an oil on board which is signed W.H. Bartlett and dated 1891. And on the back of it, it has the Fine Arts Society label. Was it bought from the Fine Arts Society, or do you know how it came into the family?
I can tell you very little. I inherited it in the 70s from a family who sailed a lot on the Thames and on the East Coast.
I gather that Bartlett worked in Ventnor and in Donegal, no connections
No
there.
connections I know of.
What I would love to ask Mark Baltimore is, can he tell us more about where the artist was working?
There is, funny enough, very little information about Bartlett, and we do know he trained in France under one of my favourite artists, the great Orientalist painter Jean-Léon Gérôme. But at some point he came back, and quite right, he painted in Ireland, and we know he painted in Cornwall, St Ives and all that sort of area. The quality is just superb, and even though it's quite small, it just works so beautifully. It's got a wonderful sort of stillness about it, hasn't it?
I like the clear water underneath the boat.
If only that was the same today. I don't think it'd be quite so clear. And I also like those rather nice autumnal sort of colours in the background. And this sort of subject matter of sort of fishermen working is very typical for Bartlett, although he did a number of interior scenes and a few landscapes. But I love these sort of quiet, still, very honest sort of pictures of fishermen. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Now, I suppose it's the value which is always an interesting point. I think a Bartlett such as this should be insured for at least £5,000.
Great.
I think it's a wonderful, wonderful image.
Very nice indeed.
Oh, isn't that really nice? That's superb object. Just the one?
Oh, yes.
You haven't got two?
No. I just have these.
No, but this is just, we'll deal with this first, because it's such an exciting thing.
Is it?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because it's a cow creamer.
Yes, but it's damaged.
Well, where's it damaged? I can't see no damage. Well, she's lost the teeth there.
Yes, that's right.
Is that all the damage?
Yes, I think so.
Well, she's very good, Dick. And she comes not very far away from here. Either she comes from Ferry Bridge, or she comes up from towards Sunderland way.
How do you know?
You can tell that by the lustre. This combination of sponge colours is typical for the northeastern potteries. They come from the St Anthony pottery, which is one of the ones around here. And she dates from about 1790.
Really?
She's a really lovely example. I mean, it's a problem, I know, you can't get very much money for cows. I mean, beef is right down on the floor.
But China ones are different.
But China ones are different, and this one's a jolly good one. Live weight, 750 pounds. I think so. I mean, she's a very, very good one.
Now we have here, madam, a very nice piece of inlaid marquetry furniture. Is it a family piece? What do you know about it?
Family heirloom, which has been in the family, to mine, well, about 3 generations, I would think.
So it's always been there as far as you
Always
know?
been in the family.
So, John, I think it started out as a cabinet on stand.
Well, that's absolutely right. It's the type of cabinet that never stood at floor level, as it is now. When things were sold, they often took a downturn in their social surroundings. And grand pieces were not for cottages. So somebody took the stand and made a table out of it, and somebody else took the cupboard and made a little floor standing unit out of it. I don't believe the top. I mean, that cannot be right. It should have just a moulded top, which would never have been seen. So it wouldn't have been a veneered top, it would have just been a pine top. And someone's put that on for utility purposes. Can you open the doors and let's have a look inside?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, magnificent. Now.
And it gets better.
Yeah, does it? Oh, lovely. That's quite exceptional to see those nice little drawers inside. They're usually just a plain cupboard or even a little cavity. In this case, it was probably made for a lady. It's quite small, isn't it?
It's probably 3.5 foot, 4 foot long, 2 foot deep.
Yes. You get an idea inside there of the wonderful colours of the original marquetry. And that could be English or Dutch. I mean, they were virtually the same to look at. Can you open a drawer for me and tell me what is the inside of the front of the drawer?
The inside of the front of the drawer is pine, as is the material under the veneer on the front cupboards.
Then in that case, it's almost certainly English. English marquetry, 1685, and the top half of what was a really quite wonderful and stunning little piece of furniture.
Now, value.
Golly. Difficult when you're valuing half a lot, really, isn't it?
Yes.
I would have thought on the market today somewhere around about £4,500.
£4,500? Is that a good price?
Very nice.
From Flintaft and MacDonald's upholstery cabinet manufactory, and the name of the man they made it for, Captain Gray, Royal Artillery Woolwich. I'm going to try putting it back into place, and then we can talk about it a little more, in a slightly more relaxed manner.
What do you know about it?
Well, it came from my husband's grandparents' home, and I believe it was always there. He always remembers it as a child, and he inherited it from his mother.
What do you think the connection is between Flintoft and MacDonald and the top, and Captain Gray, come to that?
Well, I think that he may have had it commissioned, the table commissioned to be made by Flintloff.
Absolutely correct.
Made the.
Where do you think the top came from?
Well, I don't know, but maybe Italy. I thought
You're guessing well. Everybody who went on the Grand Tour to Rome, Florence, would have brought back a souvenir. He simply would have brought back the top. These are the so-called doves of Pliny. Pliny was a Roman statesman who died in the eruption of Vesuvius. The rest of the decoration is actually pure 17th century. And so it's a bit of a mixture of historical styles. Pietra dura, Italian for hardstone.
Yes.
It's a very, very ancient technique. The Romans were doing it. The Italians have a long, long tradition in working in marble. You've only got to think of Michelangelo. What about value? I wonder how much Captain Gray paid for that. I don't think we'll ever know. I don't think we'll ever know. I can see that standing in any of the big London furniture fairs, and they would be asking, in round figures, £10,000.
Really? That's a surprise. That is a surprise.
It's a good item.
Yes.
It originated that my stepdaughter's great aunt got it in she was born in 1902 and received it as a child.
Right.
And my stepdaughter got it 10 years ago.
Well, I know nothing about teddy bears, but Hilary, you do.
Well, I heard just the tail end of that conversation, which was very interesting about the date. There are other ways of telling the date of the bear. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is exactly that. Stick your finger in its ear. And what have you found?
I found a little button. And it says S-T-I-F-F.
S-T-E-I-F-F, Stife. Well, that's a good name to conjure with. One of the best German makers. Another aid, Lars, to help me to date it is, could I ask you just to stand him up?
Stand up, Teddy. There we are.
And if you could put his arms...
Is that right?
That's perfect. Could you put his arms down by his sides?
All right, down with the arms.
He's enjoying this little bear. If you look at the where the arms come to on his legs, you can see that they're very, very long. And how long are his feet? Can you turn him sideways to me so that I can see?
Like so?
Yeah, so that I can see. Yeah. Now his feet are actually very long, aren't they? In comparison, perhaps, to the length of his leg again. So that would indicate. That would indicate to me that it is an early bear. You said that it belonged to your stepdaughter's great aunt. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
And she was born when? Just remind me.
1902.
1902. Now, at that point, children wouldn't have had bears until they were perhaps 5 or 6. So this would put the bear at around about 1907 to 8, which is just what it looks like. It looks like a very good early bear. Could the eyes possibly be boot buttons, or are they glass?
Boot buttons? They're certainly not glass.
So they could be leather-covered wood or polished wood.
Yes, they could.
Well, you have a very good bear there. I would have thought we're talking about between perhaps £3,000 and £4,000.
My goodness.
That is amazing.
Amazing. Absolutely.
I wondered if you could tell me where this lovely picture by William Lamond is.
Right, well, actually we pronounce that Lamond in Scotland. It's not Lamond.
So I've got off to a bad start. Right, now, well, tell me the name of the village. Do you think I'll ever pronounce that?
Well, I doubt it. It's a painting of Auchmithi village, yes.
Right.
And that's actually a little village near Arbroath in Angus, just north of here. So that's where it is. It's the last cottage.
Right. He was a Dundee artist, so that figures. Obviously, he was working on the coast around here.
Right. My grandfather bought it in the 20s and left it to my father. And my father actually gave it to my husband because my husband, when he was a young man, used to go around the countryside selling wools and drapery goods, and he actually used to call it this cottage.
Really?
So he had quite a sentimental attachment to it.
Oh, how lovely.
And he loves it.
Well, I think he must have probably bought it probably direct from the artist. I mean, it would have been
Possibly.
New when he acquired it, and it has a lovely fresh feel to it, doesn't it?
It does. It has lovely colours.
Absolutely marvellous, and lovely bold brush strokes as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I think the idea of the sun causing the shadow and the way the brush strokes actually carry on with that, I think it is done to great effect.
Yeah.
And there's lovely bright light in this, typical sort of seaside scene. This sort of picture today is very much in demand. The Scottish school painters are absolutely enjoying a great revival in popularity commercially, and one can understand easily why. You've got an absolutely delightful picture here, full of life, well observed. Well, today you would expect it to make about somewhere between £2,000 and £2,500 at
Really?
auction. And you could probably, you ought to insure it for about 3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much.
So it's a jolly nice thing.
That's a very nice thing, yes.
Did it come from a known collection? You know much about its history?
No, it just came from a stall at an antique fair.
Right. You've got the hallmark there, which, as I suspected, has got the date mark, which is 1884, and on the other side there is just tiny mark is SM for Samson Morton. Just remove the tail carefully and look at the glass. I mean, cameo glass was a great, not an invention in Britain, but a really triumph of artistry. The Stourbridge factories, particularly Webb's and Stevens and Williams, discovered a method of putting one layer of glass on top of another and then carving it through. They blew the two layers of glass together into a mould and then afterwards cut on a polishing wheel each individual scale, every little part of the fish's face and details, just to give the character to the creature. So each one, although essentially moulded, is all very individual. And then proudly intended to have the silver tail put on there. It's very useful to find a crack and damage inside there, which makes a big difference on something that is quite expensive. The maker of the glass was Stevens and Williams of Stourbridge, one of the great cameo workers. And the quality is great. I've only ever seen a couple of these, and they've both been cracked in the little necks on there. And they do command pretty high prices, as you would imagine, for the work. So what did the two bottles cost you? Can you remember? Be cheeky.
The Little Bird's Egg one cost me £3, and the fish was a little dearer. It cost me £3.50.
£3.50?
Yes.
And that was only 12 years ago?
Yes.
I bet you were chuffed at the time.
I was, yes.
That's because you obviously, as a collector, knew what you'd found, which is a very rare piece of glass. Beyond a scent bottle, it's an important piece of cameo glass. We're looking at a value something approaching £5,000.
Goodness. Yes, that's more than I thought. Yeah, that's lovely. Lovely.
The Little Bird seems cheap in comparison at about £350.
Thank you very much. Lovely.
Right.
Thank you.
Wedgwood, Fairyland lustre, pair of vases. They're quite spectacular. Little fairies doing all sorts of funny things with cobwebs and spiders and making absolute hay while the sun shines. Some of them are quite crazy little fairies. They're doing all sorts of incredible things. Do you like them?
Well, I didn't until just recently. I thought they were Chinese. And it was a French polisher came to the house and he saw them and said, did I know what they were? And I said, no, I didn't. I never really paid that much attention to them, I'm afraid. So when I saw the Wedgwood, then you see I took an interest.
The magic name Wedgwood changed you. The great designer of these in the 1920s was a girl called Daisy McCaig Jones, and she had this sort of passion for fairies. A lot of people did at that time. They thought fairies and elves and gnomes and things were just the job. And here you got them all sort of hiding in all sorts of inconspicuous places. They're all over the place. Some of them are being captured on the cover here. This fairy is being caught in a spider's web. It's amazingly stupid, really. This great spider is coming down to attack her. Very wonderful things. And from the 1920s, Wedgwood Fairyland lustre is, of course, now terribly collectible. They come through the family to you, then?
Yes, they did. They came from my mother-in-law's home. Yeah.
So they're very personal things.
Yes, they are.
So even, if you would want to sell them, but in perfect form. This one here, £3,000 to £3,500.
Just for the one?
Yeah. And this one, bit damaged, back to 2,000, something like that. So you're looking at 5 to 6 or something like that.
Good gracious me.
£1,000. That'll pay for a bit of French polishing, won't it?
I don't think I'm going to part with that.
Good. You keep them, but have them out now and enjoy
yes,
them.
I will. I will.
They're
Thank
great,
you very
they're great
much.
things.
Yes.
Well, of course, the special thing about today is the many hundreds of people that we've seen during our roadshow, not just here at Elton, but in the 4 other locations around the country, and what marvellous things they brought with them. So our thanks to all of them, and indeed to English Heritage, who've been our hosts here. Full details of all our discoveries can be found on the BBC website. That's bbc.co.uk/antiques. And there'll be another show next week when we're in Hampshire. So until then, from all of us here in Elton and around the country, goodbye.
Well, in fact, the Roadshow tour continues in a fortnight. Comedy next night on BBC One Scotland in a special Millennium edition of Last of the Summer Wine.